Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk to you about the second session of this introductory course on fundraising. Discussing the importance of payment methods in fundraising, Afro is a fundraising platform helping you succeed in your organization. Many Latin American organizations excel in raising resources for social causes. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this, about the topics, about the types of donations that exist. Remember, Afro is a fundraising platform. We want you to strengthen your knowledge by learning about fundraising. Many Latin American organizations succeed in raising resources for social causes. Regarding donation types, for at least 50% of income from individual donors. And we want that to happen with you, that you learn about fundraising so that when applied to your organization, you can obtain resources that allow you to be more financially stable and increase your impact. So getting into the subject a bit, when talking about the types of donations, it's important to remember that we want or seek to have donors who contribute at least 50% of your organization's income coming from individual donors. In other words, a healthy organization has income that comes from institutional fundraising. By institutional fundraising, I mean fundraising that seeks help from businesses, governments, international cooperation, grants, and all kinds of assistance that come from these types of programs. In other words, a healthy organization has income that comes from institutional fundraising. Institutional fundraising is understood as that fundraising which seeks help from businesses, governments, international cooperation, grants, and all kinds of assistance that come from these types of programs. But it's very important for the organization to also develop income from individual donations. In Latin America, 80% of income today, according to CEMEFI data from 2021, is income that comes from international cooperation, or comes from foundations, or comes from governments, or comes from corporations, and only 20% comes from individuals. But it turns out that in countries where fundraising is more developed, it is the opposite. We have an income that comes from 80% of individuals, 78% exactly in the USA, for example, and only remaining 22% from corporations. So we're flipped. We have a lot to develop in terms of individual funding. The important thing is to understand that this does work because there are organizations in Latin America that do it, and they do it systematically. They do it well, they grow, they secure more donations, and in some way, they are being successful with their process. That's what we want you to develop. How do some neighbors do it well, and how can I do it well? And these neighbors I'm talking about, other organizations are involved in various types of causes, not just humanitarian causes, not just childhood, but also ecology, religion, education, vulnerable groups, the elderly. There are all kinds of causes, development as well, of course. All kinds of causes are covered under this successful individual fund today. So if the neighbor is successful, I should do it too. And that's a bit what we seek with you when we ask you to, hey, please develop. So 2021, among individuals or natural persons, there are two types of donations. There is the donation that comes from recurring donation. It's someone who says, I'm going to give you a monthly donation. I'm going to donate to you every month. My amount will be this much per month. The average value in Latin America varies slightly from country to country. It varies a bit from campaign to campaign. Let's say that in campaigns that are based on contact centers or face-to-face interactions, the average can be between $12 and $15 per month. When I run digital campaigns, the average tends to increase. Clearly, they are more difficult to execute in a certain sense, but let's say they tend to have a slightly higher value, around $18 to $20, something like that. That varies from country to country. There are countries with greater purchasing power, for example, in Mexico. Their average donation is a bit higher. There are countries with lower purchasing power, like Central America, so their donations tend to decrease naturally. That's a bit what happens, but it works. So I have donors who are recurring donors. I have donors who are one-time donors. One-time donors are those individuals who agreed to give you a donation. Electronically, they gave you the donation, but they didn't commit to a regular amount. Because this is important, because in a way, the person who agreed to give you the donation has a much higher likelihood of giving it to you again. And in a way, you're looking for that. So there's something important here. And with this, I introduce the next topic, which is the topic of payment methods. What are the payment methods? So let's say that the traditional payment methods are, for example, receive donations that come from credit cards or debit cards. Here I make a small parenthesis. Debit cards, which are the cards linked to the available funds in the bank account, have two types of patterns or standards. There are debit cards that are standardized in the patterns of MasterCard or Visa or the major credit cards, so they function like a credit card. Where it says to pay with a credit card, you use your debit card. Transaction is exactly the same. There are countries where that is still not a standard. There are few, but they exist. So for example, if I go to Peru, I find that the cards are like this. If I go, for example, to Panama, I find the Clave system. Some debit cards are not yet affiliated with the Visa MasterCard system, so they don't work like a credit card. They require special interventions. There's a strategic advantage when debit cards follow that pattern, allowing you to capture donations easily. You have direct debits from bank accounts. This works in two ways. Instant bank debits, common in many countries like PS in Colombia and Pix in Brazil. You have cards via credit and debit cards and debits from bank accounts. Instant bank debits are in PS in Colombia and Pix in Brazil. Recurring bank account debits are in the US. This works in two ways. One is instant bank debits, which are very common in many countries like PS in Colombia, Pix in Brazil, things like that. What happens is that I make a debit and I can't set it up to recur, and I have another payment method, which is recurring bank account debits, for example, in the US. In Colombia, it has other names, but it's also an option that exists. It's also important that I have cash, I have wallet payments, I have donations through cryptocurrencies, etc., etc. What is very important about all that I just mentioned, you should prioritize and in some cases even not want to receive donations through any payment method, no matter who offers it to you, if it doesn't allow you to fully identify who donated to you. For example, this happens in Spain with Visu. If I receive donations through a digital wallet, people donate very easily, but you don't have the data of who donated to you. So sometimes it's better to say, no, I don't want you to donate that way. I don't want to open that channel, even if a lot of people use it. I'd rather lead you or force you to use the channels where I can fully identify who the donor is. If not, I'm not interested. Why? Because the name of the person who donated to you is more important than the donation itself. So that's a very important issue. Because the name of the person who donated to you is more important than the donation itself. So that's a very important issue. The second thing is, let's say you also need to prioritize or give more importance to those payment methods that create a mechanism through which you can receive future donations from that person without needing them to provide their payment details. Simple. Again, this is called or known as tokenization, and it mainly occurs with debit cards. So those are the two main things to keep in mind. Don't accept payment methods that don't allow you to identify contact information like email or phone number at the very least. Be especially careful with digital wallets. They're trendy, everyone uses them, but they're not good for donations. So watch out for that. And the second thing is to prioritize payment methods that allow you to tokenize, okay? So those are some important points. And the second thing is prioritize the payment methods that allow you to tokenize, okay? So those are some important comments. Additionally to that, well, I'd like to mention something important, and that is, what is a PSP? A payment service provider, or as we know it in Latin America, a payment gateway. Let's say that all countries have these players. These players basically integrate what you do between your organization and the banking system. What the bank does is set very high security standards for someone to connect, which are very difficult to implement. It also requires additional certifications for handling security compared to what a PSP does. A PSP is certified in managing information to ensure the security of donors and above all, the payment methods. And then it implements the connection with the bank through all the standards that exist locally in a country. So, payment method guarantees that. What are we looking for? Or let's say, so to speak, it's important here, okay? It's important to understand that in a country, there are always many options for payment gateways. There's not just one single gateway. Not all payment gateways are the same. The most common mistake I find with all my clients is that they always focus on just one factor regarding payment gateways, and that is how much they charge. What is the commission? What is the percentage? What is the fee they're charging me to use that gateway? It turns out that while that is a factor, it can be important, yes, but it's not the most important one when it comes to executing or choosing which payment gateway to use. Let's say there are additional things to consider when it comes to payment gateways. Well, there are topics you need to evaluate when choosing a payment gateway. First, what is a payment method? What is a payment method that the gateway allows? What are the fees that a gateway offers you? As for the fees, of course, it matters, but I repeat, it's not the only factor. What are the risk control processes they offer you? Some are free, others are included, and some charge you for that process. What are the rules that apply? Do they let you participate in the rules? Don't they let you participate in the rules? Cheap gateways, for example, gateways that lack sophistication, the first thing they do is block all international transactions because they consider them to be high risk. It turns out that this applies to some industries like e-commerce, but it doesn't apply, for example, to the world of foundations or donations, because you have something called the diaspora, which is people from your country living in other countries who want to support. So that's an example of a bad risk policy being applied. So it's important to understand the risk policy that the payment gateway offers you. You have the technology, Here are 4 important aspects you need to consider in terms of technology. The first thing is whether it tokenizes or not. Gateways that don't tokenize don't interest us. And there are gateways that do tokenize. Worse, gateways that charge you for tokenizing. I tokenize, but I charge you for it. They're not interesting gateways. Tokenization has to be natively inferred and accessible through an API. Then, also take into account the issue of webhooks. Webhooks are the way the gateway will return the information to you. Huge gateways in some countries have a webhook. So if I am an organization that has an e-commerce and donations, and I cannot separate the transactions, not have only one type of webhook, then I automatically create a problem. So it's very important for the gateways to allow for webhooks, which are the ways through which they notify us about the status of a transaction, whether it was accepted, not accepted, if it was correct, if it wasn't correct, etc., and that they have several webhooks. One alone doesn't work. So it happens. We have huge gateways, and everyone says, wow, the best gateway on the planet has arrived. And they're not bad gateways just because they have a single webhook. They don't allow you to bring that diversification. The API is one of the most important things. The API is something you never see when talking to a gateway. When you talk to a sales rep from a payment processor, they highlight their low fees. You don't know if their API supports creating a user-friendly donation journey. What defines a user-friendly donation journey? But you don't know if their API, which is the most important part of this whole process, allows you to build a user-friendly donation journey. What is a user-friendly donation journey? When you're about to make a donation and suddenly the donation process forces you to leave the website you're on, right? You're about to donate, so you start the donation process here, and suddenly the donor has to leave the website to go to the payment processor's page and then come back. This has many problems, not only the lack of user-friendliness in the ability to donate, but mainly the lack of traceability when using analytics and using implementations with advertising platforms. If the payment processors don't allow you to do that, then those processes simply aren't useful. You can't do marketing efficiently. So you can't prioritize payment processes that might charge you very little but have issues with their API not being robust. 1, a user-friendly API so that you can have a good process, a construction that is truly user-friendly. And these are things that when you talk to a sales rep from a payment processor, you have no idea that these things are important. So you end up missing out on very big opportunities when it comes to building an important journey to win. Why do I talk a lot about the journey? Why? Because convincing someone to support you and donate is very difficult. You're not giving anything, you're offering nothing in exchange for money. People will give you money and expect nothing in return. That's difficult. And there's an emotional conviction factor that's not so easy to achieve. And the only way you can solve that is by making your York user-friendly. It has to be as easy as possible to receive donations. If your donation process is difficult, you're going to miss out on many opportunities. And the payment processor plays a very important role in this. It has to be as easy as possible to receive donations. If your donations are hard to receive, you're going to miss out on many opportunities. And the payment processor plays a very important role in this. I repeat, when you're negotiating with the payment processor, that's not on the table. It's not obvious, especially if you're not an engineer. You can't judge whether it's going to help you or not. What do? We'll guide you a little bit. The decision will always be yours on which one, so to speak, the API passes and which one finds you the most. But we don't give recommendations based solely on prices. Rather, we focus mainly on the functionalities that will allow you to develop a truly user-friendly donation experience that makes it easy and efficient for people to support you. And the payment processor should allow you to follow up with Resi afterward. So choosing the right payment processor is very important. In the specific case of Aflu, they reach out to us, they ask us, and we're happy to help them figure out which payment processor to use. Why should you use it? Why not use it? We try to be very transparent about that. Something important is that we don't charge a commission. So our business model isn't based on the payment processor you choose. We're agnostic. We let you work with any payment processor, but we're clear about which ones give you an advantage and which ones don't. That's really something important. And well, this is a world with too many options, so it's important to keep that in mind. So, well, it's like a strategic summary of the whole vision regarding payment processors. Why should you use one payment processor over another? What are the reasons for choosing one over the other? And in a way, this leads you to this definition. Ready? That's an introduction to the world of, well, the types of donations, the payment methods, and additionally, the evaluation of the payment processors that you are going to choose. Next, we'll talk about the differences between a payment processor and a fundraising platform. They are completely different things, and we're going to explain why having a payment processor is not enough for you to have a fundraising process, let alone a digital fundraising process. You need to have a crowdfunding fundraising platform, and we'll talk about that next. Thank you for your attention to this little section.